All right, so in this video, I just want to walk through a calculation example so you can see how this is put together. So we're going to do the HDI for Vietnam. And so what we're going to start by is we're going to calculate the three individual indexes by themselves, and then we'll put it all together into the final one. It's going to be a little long, but I just want you to get a chance to see how this thing is calculated all the way through one time, so that it's clear to you where the different parts are coming from. So let's first get the index for income. Okay, so this is index for the GNI, and this is for Vietnam. So it works like this. So we got the natural log, and this right here is for Vietnam. Okay, so that's where you put the country's numbers. And then we're going to minus the natural log of 100, because remember that was like the theoretical minimum, and the natural log of 75,000, because that's kind of as far as we really cared about getting to. And then we're going to find it out. And so this ends up being 4.13 over 6.62, and that is 0.624. So and I'm not going to round off too much, because the more I round off, the more I change the final answer. I mean, the more I move the decimal in the final answer. So I'm going to not try to round off too much. So what does this mean? Well, this gives you an idea, that Vietnam has achieved approximately 62% of sort of the growth in income that is important. Okay, now you're saying, wait a second, 6,200 is nowhere near 75,000, but it's sort of remember we said the first dollars are the most important, so it's gone more than halfway of the important stuff, right? So we would expect, what this kind of tells us in maybe a more general sense, we would expect if Vietnam's income was to rise to 75,000, people's living standard would improve, but it would not improve as much as it already has. Okay, because a lot of the important stuff has already happened. Okay, let's go on to life expectancy. So life expectancy for Vietnam. So we're going to put the number for Vietnam is going to go right here, 75.3. So again, this is Vietnam. And again, I'm just want you to make sure the rest of this is just the formula, and that part is the part which is not the formula. There we go. Okay, just to keep consistent. And then we're comparing to some kind of like theoretical minimum, and then compared to kind of the maximum, and that's where we get. Okay, and so we end up with 55.3 over 65, and we get to 0.851. Something to notice, Vietnam, so this is a much bigger number, indicating that Vietnam has sort of covered much more of the ground in terms of reaching some kind of maximum possibility in life expectancy than compared to what it has in income. And notice that the life expectancy for Vietnam is quite high, 75.3. It's only a few years behind the U.S., even though the income is much, much less. So we can say, well, Vietnam has covered quite a bit of the ground there. And then finally, we're going to get the education. So the education has two parts. So we're going to have to, let's get those two parts first. Okay, so first we're going to do the expected years, and then for children, okay, and then we will do the other one. So expected years for children, so on top is going to be 12.7. That's the number for Vietnam, and we're comparing it to 18. And remember, we're not going to let anything go over 1, so if it had been more than 18, we would have just put 1 here. And this is going to be 0.706. So again, it could be higher, but it's made it more than kind of halfway to the center of like goal number. And then we got our mean years of schooling for adults for Vietnam, and this is where the number is lower. And this indicates, the fact that it's lower indicates that education levels are rising significantly in Vietnam compared to what they were before. And that's pretty much happening in the whole world. And so this ends up getting to be 0.547. Okay, so it's not as close to this maximum for the mean years of schooling. That means the future kids are expected to be closer to this kind of goal than the past ones were. And then finally, we need to turn this into the education one. So turn this into the education one for Vietnam. We're just going to put these two things together. Okay, so this is 0.706 times 0.547, and we're taking the square root of them. So this is called getting a geometric mean, and we end up with 0.621. Okay, so we got this number, that's education, and that's our life expectancy, and that is our income. And now, finally, we put them all together in to get our final number. So this is, again, we put them all together to get our HDI number. So our HDI for Vietnam is going to be, this is our formula, and then we're going to put these three in there. So 0.624 times 0.851 times 0.621. And what do we get? We end up getting 0.691. If you look in the table, you're going to find that it's actually rounds off to 0.693. The reason we got a little off on our the thousandths place here, the reason this is a little off is because of all the rounding. Because we rounded here and we rounded at each step, rounded, and we rounded. And so all that different rounding is going to make the final answer be slightly off, but it's still really, really close. Okay, so that's how HDI is counted. So it's a measure of how far, how close countries are to sort of this maximum or this goal for these different components of human development, and it's kind of a measure of how far they are. So if you see something that's in the 0.9 something, that means they're like more than 90% along the way, right? And so Vietnam is sort of, you can think of this almost 70% along the way of this human development. And if you were to go around and again, the theoretical minimum is super low. So the theoretical minimum doesn't even exist in the world today. It existed at some point in the past, but it doesn't exist in the world today. But it's along, you would be able to see this if you go between these different countries. You would likely see the difference. It would be visual in some ways, not just from the standard of living, but from health conditions and other kinds of difficulties that people have. Okay, so we'll come back. I'll give you an activity so you can go through one of these, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what countries can do to boost their education and also to boost their health status and their life expectancy.